All right, well, since it's 10:02, I think I'm gonna kick this off. Thanks for joining, everyone. I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, maybe give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen there. Love it. Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us today. We know that there's been a lot of information thrown at everyone and lots of questions and confusion since the CARES Act passed last Friday. And so we've been trying to get all of the questions gathered. We've been trying to gather all of the answers that we can. The SBA is continually releasing new information, so the team here has been doing our best to keep up to date with it. And we just wanted to gather everyone, see your beautiful faces, and kind of give an overview of everything, but also hear what your questions are. So today we have Tyler from CTB. Tyler, do you want to give him a wave quick? Perfect. And then we have Christy calling in from Fargo from the North Dakota Women's Business Center. Want to give a wave? Awesome. And then there's me. I'm the founder of MakeWell. And we're just excited to honestly get some information to your hands because you probably qualify for something, if not two things. And so we just are excited to have you here and want to get some resources into your hands. But first, we want to just go over a couple of rules to make this a good experience for everyone. If you're not already muted, please mute your mic. We'll be using the chat box and other things to kind of visit with each of you. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box so that you don't lose that train of thought, but just know that we'll be answering them at the end. It'll be a really quick overview, but we want to make sure that Tyler can share that information with you. And then if you do have any questions that go unanswered, I'm going to be monitoring the chat and writing those questions down. But there's also this email at CTB&D. If you guys have any questions, be sure to reach out to that email so that Tyler or someone on the team can follow up with you. So with that, I'm going to turn over presentation to Tyler.
Sweet. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you for inviting us to partner with you on this. We're learning a lot at CTB in the North Dakota Women's Business Center over the last 2 weeks, and every time we get to chat with new entrepreneurs, it helps us inform what gaps we still need to fill in. So this is mutually beneficial for sure. Goal here is to get you some good information on these programs that have rolled out over the last 3 weeks. These have rolled out very quickly, which of course was a necessity because people needed money in their hands quickly. So as kind of a consequence of that fast rollout, there's 3 kinds of information that we're gathering right now. Is one, what we know about how the program is designed to work in theory, so what's in the regulations and how the legislation was written. 2 is, especially in the last week, as these programs are starting to actually roll out and they're taking applications, what we know about how the program is actually working in practice, which in a lot of cases is quite different than how what we heard was going to work in theory. And then the third thing is, what are the most significant questions we have that we don't have enough information to answer yet? I think this is important because depending on who you talk to, they're filling in gaps or answering questions that we just don't have answers to yet. So people are moving forward with bad information, and that's causing hiccups in the process and potentially more bottlenecks in these application processes. So hopefully looking to equip you with as good and as accurate of information as we can this morning. So the 3 programs we'll be discussing is one, the unemployment expansion, particularly as it relates to independent contractors, entrepreneurs, self-employed folks. 2 is the economic injury disaster loan and grant program. And the third one is the Paycheck Protection Program. So we'll start with the unemployment insurance expansion. So what we know is typically there was just the regular uninsurance. With the CARES Act legislation that's expanded that, they've opened up 2 other application portals, 2 other kinds of unemployment insurance you can apply for. One is the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, referred to as the PEUC. So this is simply an extension of unemployment benefits for folks that have already been on unemployment and are running to the end of their timeline. So what was previously written in our unemployment regs was that you get up to 26 weeks or a half year. In this new CARES Act legislation, they've expanded that to 36 weeks. So that's what necessitated this PEUC program, is that people on existing unemployment can apply for that to extend their unemployment by an additional 13 weeks. The the program that applies to the Make Well community, to self-employed, independent contractors, and gig economy participants is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, the PUA. So this applies to anybody who is an independent contractor, anybody self-employed, a sole proprietor. If you're a freelancer, this is the program you can apply for. Note that we'll look at the Jobs ND website in just a second here, but you do have to click on the link that's specific to the PUA program to apply for it. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. But first, just an overview of the program. So it provides up to 39 weeks of unemployment insurance benefits, pays approximately 50% of your average weekly income over the past 12 months plus $600 a week. So we will look at that. They have a very simple spreadsheet that's out there, and we'll look at that briefly too. It's a tool you can use, and we'll make sure we get that emailed out to you, that it's based on your quarterly earnings over the last 12 months is what they're looking at there. And then that 50% of average weekly income plus $600 a week, that $600 a week will be available for up to 4 months only. So you don't get 39 weeks of that. It's roughly 15 to 16 weeks of that additional $600 a week, which is a really generous benefit. This is a very aggressive expansion of the unemployment program. So what I want to look at now is just on the job service website, if I can get there. Sorry, my Zoom thing is covering up my tab right now. 1 second. I had this all set up, and then of course I closed it out right when I was bringing it up. Sorry guys, 1 moment here. All right, so here is the jobsnd.com website. So jobsnd.com is where you want to go. Right on their homepage here, the first thing you'll see is these 3 different application portals. So you have the regular unemployment on the left. That's the red box. This is that PEUC. So this is the 13-week extension of regular unemployment benefits. The one that relates to our Make Well community is this green box over here, the PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, okay? So right here is where you'll see all of the regs written. A couple things I want to highlight on here is what kind of documentation you'll need to verify your income. So as you scroll down on this page, there's a couple different documents that they'll refer you to here that you'll have to submit and complete. But the pieces that we want to highlight here, I think that are most important, is this examples of acceptable documents self-employed individuals may submit to show proof of employment or earnings. So these are the different documents you could use to show what you earned, what your average weekly wage was over the last 12 months. Is all these different things that they bullet here. So federal or state income tax returns from 2019, business financial statements or records. These would likely have to be backed up with 1099s or couldn't just be a QuickBooks P&L. Likely you'd have to have the documentation from vendors that paid you as well. Utility bills to current business license or rental agreement to prove that you are a business. Affidavits from individuals having knowledge of the business or other evidence to verify you're self-employed. And then self-employed individuals should include a copy of Schedule C, F, SE, or K with your Form 1040 to determine monetary eligibility, okay? So they're ideally, I think that's what they want to go to, is your quarterly tax returns over the last 12 months and using those to determine a weekly wage. The weekly wage, they have this, and we'll email this little spreadsheet out. This is from Job Service ND. It's just a simple little calculator. This isn't a guaranteed benefit, but it can help you determine what you can reasonably expect for a benefit. So the boxes you fill in here are just these quarterly wages from 2019. So in this instance, I just plugged some numbers in here that you had $10,000 in earnings in Q1, $14,000 in Q2, 8,000 in Q3, and 10,000 in Q4, and then it'll populate the rest of this for you. So based on these numbers, it'll tell you what you can expect for your weekly benefit. Now this is without the additional $600 a week, right? So if you Like if we plug in different numbers here, let's say we didn't make quite as much. So, and then it'll adjust this for you as you adjust those quarterly earnings numbers, okay? So again, this would be what a typical unemployment benefit would be in a non-COVID affected time. What you're looking at is this number plus $600 a week for up to 4 months is what you can reasonably expect for a benefit if you qualify for unemployment, okay? And we'll email this, again, we'll email this spreadsheet out so you can have it. It's right on the Job Service ND website as well, but. Okay, the other thing, other key provision in the CARES Act legislation is you don't have to be completely unemployed as an independent contractor or freelancer. So even if you are underemployed, if you took, say, a 60% or 80% revenue hit, you can still qualify for unemployment benefits. On the back end, they will require weekly verification of any revenue or any income you generated, and your benefit will be adjusted by that amount. So that's one big question we have remaining here is exactly what that process looks like. But some of that is laid out on here. I know Job Service ND has been working really hard to get these new regs in place and to update their interface to accommodate the new regulations. That back-end verification, I believe it will be a weekly communication with Job Service that's needed so that you can plug in any revenue that you've generated, and your benefit will be adjusted accordingly to account for that income. Okay. All right, let's see if. Just one second. Guess what I did, Ashton? I closed out my. I closed out our PowerPoint, Ashton, when I closed out my Google browser, so my Chrome browser.
I can send you the link again.
Do you just want to share yours and you can just go through the slides as we're going? I don't have to switch between anything else anymore.
I think it would probably work. I sent you the link on chat. Let's see if that works, and if not, I can definitely reshare.
Okay. One second.
This is probably a good time. We'll make sure to share the recording of this afterwards with kind of a list of questions that we covered, so you kind of have a directory of questions to follow up with. So that'll be posted after this. Yeah, and just a reminder, if you do have questions as Tyler's presenting, put them in the chat, and then we'll ask away, get him and both Christy's answers and knowledge at the end.
Sorry for the delay there. We're back up here. Okay, so that documentation required, and we'll send that Job Service link in a follow-up email as well, but it's just jobsnd.com. And again, the big questions remaining on this program is unclear what the turnaround time will be given the large volume of applicants Job Service ND is processing. So they've said in theory it should be a week. I would expect at least twice that. So if you are interested in unemployment benefits, I'll get your application in as soon as possible to get that started. And then the other thing that's not completely clear yet is on the back end, what does that revenue or income verification look like so that you can still be running your business, you can still be taking jobs and generating income, and just have your unemployment benefit adjusted to account for that income. All right, so that's the unemployment insurance program. The PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, is the one that applies to the Make Well community. Next program we're going to talk about is the EIDL program, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So what we know about this program right now is there's two components of this program. One, the one that you all are probably more interested in or should be interested in, is the Emergency Economic Injury Advance or grant. So the way the verbiage is written, it's up to $10,000 advanced to the applicant that does not have to be repaid. This is essentially a grant. Okay. What's unclear is how much, what's written in the regulations right now is that you can request that $10,000 advance and it will be sent to you in a 3-day, with a 3-day turnaround. We haven't seen that with anybody who's actually applied for it. So that's, again, here's how it's supposed to work in theory. What we're seeing in practice is that that'll likely be at least 2 weeks. Other thing that's unclear with this program is you request the $10,000 advance through the portal, and we'll send you that link in a follow-up email where you can apply for this. But how it's determined that if you're just a sole proprietor with no employees, how much of that $10,000 do you get as a grant? So what we've heard, but hasn't been confirmed yet, is that it is based on the number of employees you have. So if you have 3 employees, you get $3,000. So it's $1,000 for every employee you have. It does not discriminate between full-time or part-time employees. So if you have 1 full-time employee and 4 part-time employees, it counts that as 5 employees. That's what we've seen or what we've heard to this point of how they're determining how much is granted to each applicant. The other piece that looking at the way the rest of the regulation has been written or the rest of the legislation has been written, you as the owner or the sole proprietor or independent contractor should count as 1 employee. So the way I believe, or I'm assuming this is going to be rolled out, is that if you are a sole proprietor with no employees, you would be eligible for a $1,000 grant through this program. What we're also seeing on the ground, it's not clear after you submit your initial application what the follow-up from SBA is, so what the next step in the process is. What we've heard in just the last 24 hours is that they are sending those to local lenders, and that some of the applicants have received a follow-up from a local lender to talk through their situation with them and determine how much of that $10,000 grant they can expect. So I apologize, we don't have better information on this right now. That's just what we're hearing, and those are the parts that are unclear right now. Is once you submit that application, what does the rest of the process look like in determining how much of that grant you're eligible for? If I had to put money on it right now, if I had to bet, I would say that if you're a sole proprietor with no employees, you're counted as 1 employee for the business, and as such, you're eligible for a $1,000 grant through this emergency economic grant program. Okay. But again, I would just like unemployment, I would say we're advising all of our clients to get your application in the portal. Applying for the program doesn't commit you to anything. If it is awarded, you don't have to take it. But if you are in a situation where you don't know how much cash you're going to need over the next 2 to 6 months, or however long this COVID pause lasts, we're advising our clients to get your application in, because we expect an uncertain turnaround time on this. I'd say 2 weeks is probably a best case scenario, but depending on how they continue rolling this out, it could be up to a month or more. So if you're uncertain of what your cash need is going to be over the next 3 months or however long this pause lasts, I would strongly recommend you get your EIDL application in. Another thing, whether you're so the other part of this program is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which is a loan of up to $2 million with a 30-year term and a 3.75% interest rate. Whether you're applying for the advance or the loan, the application starts the same through that EIDL portal, which the link is right here to where you can find that. But we'll send that in a follow-up email as well. But in that initial application, all it asks is for your information and whether you are requesting the $10,000 advance. So it's a fairly quick application. It shouldn't take you too long to fill out. And just make sure you check the box that says, I am requesting the $10,000 advance, so that you get in that queue. Okay.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
Just a point of clarity. The advancement for the EIDL program is available within 3 days of the approval, not the application submission. We just had a little word change there. So just wanted to reiterate the fact that it's available 3 days after approval, not the submission of, yeah. And then a question, Tyler, can you go over what forms? I know I'm getting that question a lot. Deidre has also posted that question here, but what forms do you have to be registered with the Secretary of State, or can you use your Social Security number and your EIN number to apply for the EIDL program?
Yeah, so if you're applying and have employees, you'll need an EIN number of the business that employs those individuals. So if you're applying just as a sole prop, you can just apply with your Social Security number. Yeah, good question, and thank you for the point of clarification there too, Christy. Okay, so the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, when we get into the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, which is the next one we'll talk about, we'll talk a little bit about the differences between this loan program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the Paycheck Protection Program debt program. I'm not going to get too much into that right now because it really becomes relevant when you look at what needs each of these loan programs serve. But for the EIDL, important to point out, sole proprietors and independent contractors are eligible. Here's the link where you can apply for that and find more information on it. The big questions we have remaining is it's not clear who does the follow-up and what that process looks like after the initial application is submitted to the portal. We have heard that local lenders are getting back to applicants. We've heard that from a couple applicants, so that could be the way that SBA is choosing to run this, is distributing that workload with local lenders. And then the other piece that isn't clear is how is amount granted to each applicant determined. Again, what we've heard is it's $1,000 per employee that you have, but that hasn't been confirmed by the SBA yet. So those are the questions that we still have to answer. And again, I would, if you're unsure of what your cash need is, I would get an EIDL application in as soon as possible, because again, applying doesn't commit you to anything, but if you do need these funds or do need this support, you'll want that application in the queue sooner rather than later.
Tyler, one more question. Do you get a confirmation number, and what does that look like? Can you talk anything about once you've submitted, should you get a confirmation number?
The first point of contact after the application is submitted that I've seen is from the local lender. So I'm not, unless they're updating the system to send a verification email right away, we haven't seen that from people that have applied yet. So, but again, like even as of this morning, we had to update some of the information here with new information that just came out last night or this morning. So these are very fluid situations, and but up to this point, for people that have applied, the first contact they've gotten back is from a local lender that we've heard. Okay. All right, so that is the EIDL program. Last program we're going to talk about is the Paycheck Protection Program. So the Paycheck Protection Program is a short-term debt program with the option for that debt or loan to be forgiven. So this is for short-term payroll, rent, and utility needs, okay? The way you apply is with a local lender, so you can only apply for this program through a local bank. The most you can request through this program is your average payroll cost, average monthly payroll cost over the last 12 months times 2.5. So 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs over the last 12 months. If you don't have 12 months of payroll history, that's okay. Whatever payroll history you have, they will accept. The only requirement is that you needed to be in business by February 15th. So if you were not a business as of February 15th, 2020, you are not eligible for this program. So the one thing with this, when you're determining, looking at payroll costs, it's income that you've had. So if you're a sole prop or independent contractor, it's your net income, not your gross. So your net income that you've earned, anything you paid to employees, of course. If you pay health benefits, any health benefits, any retirement benefits. So it's a pretty expansive definition of payroll. For independent contractors, I think the big question is going to be, is it your gross income, essentially your sales, or your net income? And we just received verification from lenders last night that it's actually your net income they're considering here. So you can request up to 2.5 times your net income through this program. Again, you have to work with a local lender. There is a fairly simple application form that the SBA has put out that lays out what documents you need. If you look at step 2 here, if you're interested in this program and reaching out to a local lender, I would have these forms together. So IRS forms 940, 941, and 1099 miscellaneous, organizational documents if there are any, payroll summary reports, trailing 12-month P&L statements. So that's your last 12 months of P&Ls, and any mortgage, rent, and utility payments that you made over the last 12 months as well. Reason being is the lenders are being somewhat overwhelmed with these applications. If you manage to get a meeting with them or get a point of contact with them, you're going to want to have your documentation together so you can get your application in the queue immediately, okay? All right, so the forgiveness part of this, I think, is the most interesting part. So if you are funded through this program, you get that 2.5 times your average monthly payroll is what you're funded. What can be forgiven is from the date of funding over an 8-week period, whatever is spent on payroll costs, so whatever, even if you're paying yourself a wage, that can be forgiven. Rent payments, so if you're renting a facility, if you're buying a facility, any interest payments that you make on that mortgage, and any utility payments. So utility payments would include water, electricity, and phone and internet. So anything in that 8-week period you spend in those 4 categories can be forgiven through this program. One stipulation on that is no more, or at least 75% of the amount forgiven has to be for payroll. So you can only, if in those other 3 categories, rent, mortgage interest, or utilities, it can only be 25% of the total amount forgiven. So it's dependent on that as well. But so if you are funded in this program, I think you want to take a good look at what you expect to pay in those categories over the next 8 weeks. You do not have to take the full loan if you only want the piece that you reasonably expect will be forgiven. So that could be something that at CTB we could work with you on figuring out what that looks like. But again, if this is a program that you're interested in, I would recommend, 1, finding the form on the SBA page, the application form, and we'll send a link in the follow-up email to that. And then 2, making sure you have your documentation together for that first meeting with the lender. The sooner you can get your documents to the lender, the sooner they can start getting your application moving forward. Okay, so that is a quick overview of what we know about these 3 programs right now, but we can open it up for questions.
All right, so if you have questions, put them in the chat room and we'll be sure to get to them. I can't tell if it's a statement or question, but I think Mike wants clarification on the EIDL application. So just kind of what we were talking about. Do you receive an application number, but no other confirmation? Was that the final answer to that? So like when you submit?
Mike, that you've seen, you're saying?
That is what I'm seeing, here, is that you do receive an application number, but that is the only that is your confirmation number, is that application number, is what I'm understanding. Tyler, is that how you understood it too with the EIDL application?
Right, and I actually haven't seen that yet. So again, I don't know if that's something that's how it's supposed to work in theory, if that's what's actually happening. From people that I've talked to that have applied for the program, the first response they had was from a local lender. So it could be once that application is completed, there's an application number that shows there, but I haven't seen an email or email confirmation or anything sent to those applicants.
All right, we have our next question from Leslie. She's a sole proprietor family photographer with an in-home studio. What would you suggest that she signs up for?
So proprietor family photography studio. So I would suggest, 1, getting in, applying for that EIDL program right away. Depending on how much of a revenue hit you've taken, I would look at the PUA unemployment expansion. One thing with the EIDL and the Paycheck Protection Program, the amount of funds there could be pretty limited, especially with the Paycheck Protection Program. We anticipate that, I think it was $350 billion allocated, that they will get those dollars spent out very quickly. I think the unemployment benefit could be more stable, and I'm encouraging people to look at that and not depend on the EIDL or Paycheck Protection Program, because that funding, unless we see a third piece of stimulus come out from the federal level, that funding could be gone in 2 weeks.
All right. MLA said, we filled out the PUA on Monday. Do we need to apply weekly, like regular unemployment, or just sit tight until we hear back?
Sit tight until you hear back, Emily. They should, once they get back to you, they'll lay out the process for you and what you need to report weekly. But I know one of the requirements that's been waived is that you need to reach out to 4 employers every week. So previously, before COVID, that was a requirement of unemployment benefits, is you had to document that you've touched base or talked to 4 different employers, that you're actively seeking employment. That's not the requirement here. If you're getting an unemployment benefit and still generating revenue, that's what's going to have to be reported weekly. But You don't have to reapply weekly. They'll get back to you and lay out that program for you, what that process will look like.
Great. Rebecca has a question about the PPP and the PUA. Are you able to double up, or how do they work together?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So if you are getting the PPP and paying yourself a wage, and you also get the unemployment benefit, you'll just have to, so you can get that unemployment benefit until your Paycheck Protection loan is funded. If you're paying yourself, then you just have to report that wage to unemployment, and they'll adjust your benefit accordingly. So it's another question about how these programs interact together. But if you can get through, if you're through the 8 weeks and you're back to business as usual, then you could potentially put less pressure on the unemployment system by not taking all that benefit. But
a follow-up question is, can you pay your future rent like 3 to 12 months out with the PPP as long as it's 25% of that total?
Another good question. Unfortunately, no. You can only pay rent for that 8-week period, just expenses that are incurred in that 8-week period.
For a sole proprietor, though, you could accept that as payroll and then later use that money for rent, correct?
But yeah, as long as you have to show that you actually paid those wages out, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. And how do you show that you've paid yourself? Are you supposed to document a transaction in your bank account? Do you write yourself a check? How does that work for sole proprietors?
Yeah, as long as you've taken a drawn off the business, there'd be a number of different ways you could verify that. Again, this is one of the questions we don't know on the back end of these programs exactly what the verification looks like. But I would just make sure you have a bank transaction that's dated within that 8-week funding period. So just as long as it's an actual bank transaction, that at the least would be verification of that.
Sure. All right, any other questions? Oh, here we go. Many freelancers or business owners in the creative services work from gig to gig, so job to job. There may also be lagging indicators on income and projects. For instance, just finishing and getting paid for projects started pre-COVID. How much discretion comes into play when deciding to apply for one of these programs? How do the government branches verify and determine a freelancer or business is in distress and warrants a loan grant or UI benefit?
Yeah, really good question, Mike. Everybody's situation is different, right? Unemployment benefit here is really stimulus dollars. This is not typical unemployment, right? The spirit of this legislation is to pay people so they can stay home, because that's what we need to do to battle the coronavirus. So how do the governing branches verify and determine if freelancer business is in distress and warrants a loan grant or UI benefit? I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for that. If you're wondering if you were feeling any stigma with applying for all three of these, I would say we need to remove that. And I don't know if that's what you're getting at here, Mike, is there will be opportunity for abuse of these programs, no question about it. I would say that the spirit of these programs is to pay people to stay home and still be able to, so that we can get our economy back up and going sooner. So if that's what you're asking, I would say that there's no issue in applying for all three. Applying for them does not commit you to anything, but especially with the EIDL program and the Paycheck Protection Program, we don't know what the turnaround times on these programs are going to be. So the sooner you're in those application portals, the sooner you'll know whether you'll be funded or not. So yeah, I don't know how the government is exactly determining. I don't even think they know how. I think they've rolled these programs out very quickly and very aggressively because that was necessary. But I'm not sure how I think with the biggest opportunity or the biggest gray area there is, how does the unemployment get together? How does the unemployment interact with the other two programs? Right. And I think that's the biggest gray area. But especially with the PUA, there is that weekly verification required, so that if you are getting a EIDL grant, that's revenue, right? A grant is revenue. Or if you are doing the Paycheck Protection Program, to get that forgiven, you have to be using it on payroll and paying people. So if you're on unemployment or getting that unemployment benefit while taking advantage of those programs, that will have to be accounted for, and your unemployment benefit will be adjusted accordingly. So that's the, I think I'm answering your question, Mike, but is that kind of what you're asking, or?
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. That was very helpful. And, to provide an example, imagine the way that unemployment is typically defined is someone is working at a job and receiving a paycheck, and then they lose that employment and they are hence unemployed. With people in the creative services industry, it might be more of a gray area. I talked about the lagging indicators. So for someone like a graphic designer, for instance, they may be just finishing projects they started pre-COVID, and they're getting a few calls, and there's some work out there available. So technically, this person would not be unemployed in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
So I'm really concerned with, like, what is the threshold for that graphic designer out there, or that portrait photographer, or that person who's kind of wondering, are they unemployed? Should they take advantage of that? Should they apply for one of these programs? Because there's a lot of need out there, and there might be people that would be better applicants or more qualified based on need.
Yeah, it's a good. I mean, it's a judgment call, right? What they're requiring on the front end with both the EIDL and the Paycheck Protection Program, which opens us up to this question, is simply a good faith certification from the business owner, contractor, the freelancer. So a good faith certification that you have been adversely affected by COVID-19. The reason they're doing that is there are very few businesses that haven't been adversely affected in some way, right? So I think for instance, with the EIDL program, there's not a lot of dollars available per business. So that I think just those dollars, you should apply for it and see if you can get that grant, right? You'll have to certify that you did take a revenue hit, right? But that's, whether that's 50% or 30%, that's a adverse effect of COVID-19, right? And that's going to vary from business to business, of course. On the Paycheck Protection Program, if you're not spending those dollars within those allowable areas, it won't be forgiven. So then you're just taking on debt, right? It's under favorable terms. The Paycheck Protection Program is a 2-year term at 1% interest rate. So that's a low cost of debt, but you unless you're going to spend it within those allowable areas, you can't have that forgiven. Okay. And on the unemployment benefit, on the unemployment expansion, I think it's a really nice affirmation of the gig economy, that it's been expanded to freelancers, that this is such a significant part of our economy now. And I think on the back end, the verification of it, you can still run your business. You can still be creative in building your business and seeing are there opportunities in this COVID pause that you can pursue, and your benefit will be adjusted accordingly. So I think they've tried to balance rolling these programs out quickly and throwing them out there without knowing exactly how they'll work and interact with putting some back end verification in place to mitigate abuse of the programs, or to make sure it's getting with the people that need them. I think the other thing they've done, they're trying to do well, is distributing the workload and not having it all handled at the federal level. That the states are handling unemployment with the PPP program. They're distributing that to local lenders, and now it looks with even the EIDL program, they're distributing that follow up with local lenders. So it's not top down. It's not handled all at the federal level. It's handled locally. But it's, I guess, to answer your question as directly as I can, it's a judgment call, Mike, and they're trying to they try to do as much as they can in getting these programs out quickly while putting pieces in place to ensure the people most at need, or that are going to benefit most, are the most qualified for them.
Okay, thank you, Tyler.
Yeah.
And just one clarification: if you do get the $1,000 for the EIDL, that would get taken out of your overall PPP amount, correct?
That's a really good clarification, a talking point I missed there. So if you do get the EIDL grant and the Paycheck Protection Program, any loan, any part of the Paycheck Protection Program loan that's forgiven will be reduced by the amount you get in the EIDL program granted to you. So you can't double dip there. But.
Yeah, because we are chatting a little bit, and one of the fears is that we apply for all three, we get all this money, and then suddenly we're asked to give it all back because we double dipped. And it sounds like they are figuring out how they overlapped correctly, and they're not going to give us more money than what we should be given.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Kristen asked, how long are the payments deferred on the EIDL?
It's 6 months. Payments and both principal and interest are for 6 months right now. I think that can be extended to a year too. It's 6 months by default, with just another 6 months extension if you request it.
Gotcha. She just threw in a link for the North Dakota Department of Commerce meeting. I think that's really helpful, and I plan to tune into that after this. So if you are curious kind of what the state commerce is doing, that's a good meeting to check into every Thursday.
I think that's another, even doing calls like this information's updated every day. We're learning more by the hour, it seems like, on these programs. Even last night and this morning, just updating the talking points with new information that's come out in the last 12 hours. So that North Dakota Department of Commerce call, that's every Thursday. That's a really good one to be on top of. The North Dakota Department of Commerce ND response page has a really good Q&A they keep updated on these different programs as well. So they have the three we've talked about today. They also have the direct payment to citizens, that stimulus piece that's coming out. And then they have a fifth one that will be any local resources that the state puts in place once this shakes out a little more. So that's another one I'd encourage you to stay on top of, and we'll send that link in a follow-up email as well.
Before we go, I want to ask one question on behalf of someone that I visited with earlier this week. She was completely self-employed in 2019. And just as of probably like a month ago, she started working for someone. So she was employed and she just got furloughed. So she was trying to ask me what she should do if she falls into the typical unemployment category, or if it's because it's based on 2019, if she should act like she's a self-employed person.
So furloughed employees do qualify for unemployment. And so
Okay.
She would be in the regular unemployment portal there if
Gotcha.
She was just an employee who's been furloughed.
Okay.
Yep. Good question.
All right. Well, do you have any final questions, everyone? Otherwise, we'll let you guys go.
Thank you for the questions, everyone. I hope this was helpful and we helped clear the waters a little bit. I think it's really important just to, if you're interested in the Paycheck Protection Program, speak to your local lender sooner rather than later. If the EIDL program is something you're interested in, get that application in sooner rather than later. And unemployment benefit, you can take that while still having these other programs there and running your business. That benefit can be adjusted based on what you're earning. So.
Yeah, I think the overall message is apply. Apply for them, see what you can get, because it is meant for us. We're not meant to be disqualified from any of these things as self-employed workers and business owners. So take advantage and talk to your bank.
And just a message of support too, you've got the email down on the bottom. So CTB, North Dakota Women's Business Center, is also here to help with those questions too, because every business is so unique. And that COVID help at ctbnd.com is also an option for you for individual questions.
Yeah, especially if you have needs or challenges unique to your business, we'd be happy to talk through those with you. So.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. We'll be sure to email this out to you and follow those links that Tyler was mentioning. We'll get those in your hands as soon as possible, and we hope to see you in person as soon as possible.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
All right. See ya.